Let me make it all official. Good evening, everybody. It's 7:05 on August 22nd. This is Alderwoman Nicole Lee with the 11th Ward. And we are on a community call this evening regarding the property at 3815 South Ashland and the proposal to purchase the property and convert it, to build a new building for cold storage. This is not a zoning change meeting. I just want to be clear. I'm going to let the attorney Rob Gamreth introduce everybody on his side first, and then we'll go through and do some quick introductions for neighbors and other concerned community members that happen to be on the call, and then we'll go ahead and let you jump in to your presentation, Rob. The only other thing that I'll add in here is that, so this is just it's a discussion. I realize that this is going to be a bigger conversation, as I said at the top of the call before we started recording. So consider this part one of at least 2 meetings, and I'll go ahead and let Rob go start and do quick introductions. We'll introduce everybody else and we'll hand it back to you for your presentation.
Thanks very much, Alderwoman Lee. As she indicated, my name is Rob Gamreth. I'm with the law firm Burke, Warren, McKay, and Saratella. Pleased to be here tonight to discuss this project, an exciting new project in the 11th Ward that's being proposed by my client, Karis Cold Storage. Also on this Zoom meeting is Brian Niven and Ken Verne with Carriage Cold Storage, and Andy Lau also with Carriage Cold Storage. We have our traffic engineer, Sarah Disney Hoff, and our architect, Michael Cody, and our air quality consultant, Jenny Conan, on as well. And then our contractor, Mike Stella, and Jamie Bonaviere as well. So cast of thousands joining us, but we wanted to be sure that we could answer any and all questions that came up. As indicated, we'll try to give an overview, and since this is the first of 2, we'll get into some detail, but also be mindful of people's time and try and leave ample time for questions and answers. And we're happy to do that tonight, after tonight's meeting, or at another meeting as well. In terms of our presentation, we'd just like to give a brief overview of the project, talk about the zoning review, and what's required under the city zoning code, and then we'll get into a description of the project, the traffic study and its results, and the air quality study and its results. So in terms of the project itself, the site, just to orient everyone, is the property. It's roughly 5 acres at the northeast corner of.
Hey, Rob, can I just pause for a moment? I just wanted to get a sense of the community members that are on the call too.
Oh, yes.
Before you jump into that. So I tried to remember everybody that you said. So Rob, Andy, Brian,
Ken Verne,
Jenny, also part of your team? No, Bar Engineering.
Yes.
Okay. And then Jamie's Bonaviere.
And Alderwoman Lee, I'm happy to send you an email that lists
has everybody's names.
Yes, if
Great.
that would be helpful.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just let everybody one by one introduce themselves. Chris, can you start? Chris Kanich, would you mind?
Hi, everybody. This is Chris Kinish. I'm a community member here in the 11th Ward. I'm very interested in learning more about what's going on with this project.
Thanks, Chris. Next person here, you've already met Kathy Disney from my team. Michael Cody, are you a resident?
No, I am the architect.
Oh, sorry.
With the team. No problem.
Matt, hi, Matt. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi, Matt Malik, same description as Chris, different name. I'm a resident, student here in law.
Great, thanks for being with us. I see an M. Stella, are you a neighbor or constituent from the ward?
Oh, I'm with the general contractor.
Okay, great, nice to meet you. Are there any other constituents or residents on the call that I missed? Hello, Robert. Thank you. And I did get a couple of questions that were emailed to me too. So I'll let you jump into the presentation. And again, for anybody that has joined, and I just full disclosure, we did not publish the date of this meeting under normal circumstances. It would go on our Facebook page at least a week in advance and in our newsletter at least a week in advance. It was noticed properly to everybody within 250 feet. So I imagine there's going to be a lot more interest, and that's why also a second meeting is going to be in order. So I'm going to go ahead and just hand this over to Rob, and I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Great, thank you again. So just to orient everyone, the site we're talking about is at the northeast corner of Ashland Avenue and Pershing Road. It's currently improved with a long vacant, obsolete manufacturing building. Anybody that's familiar with the site will recognize it, covered in graffiti. It's been vacant for a number of years. Many of the windows are broken out, and it's really not a productive use right now in the ward, in the community. What is being proposed at that site is for the building to be demolished and an approximately 100,000 square foot cold storage facility to be constructed on the site with about 46 parking spaces and 18 truck trailer spaces. We'll go into more detail when Mike Cody speaks about the design and so forth. But in terms of the existing zoning and the request for relief that we need to seek under the zoning code, the property right now is in PMD 8A, and that's a very large and probably is the largest planned manufacturing district in the city of Chicago. It runs from roughly 35th Street down to 47th and from Ashland to Halsted Street, and everything in that PMD is contemplated for some type of industrial or manufacturing use. It's probably better known by its former name, the old stockyards. This particular cold storage facility fits under a warehousing and freight movement use category, and that is a permitted use under the PMD 8A. So this can be built as of right from a zoning standpoint. However, the city did maybe a year ago make some changes to the zoning code, and for this type of use on a property that is less than 10 acres, we are required to go through the city's site plan review process, and that process involves a traffic study being conducted, an air quality report being conducted and analyzed, and it's done by our consultants, and then it's shared with the city and the Chicago Department of Planning and Development and the Chicago Department of Public Health. Both look at those studies as well as the Chicago Department of Transportation. So they're vetted by the city as well. And those are to be presented at a community meeting along with the project overall. And that's what brings us here tonight. I don't think that Jake Finley has joined yet. So what maybe we could do, Alderwoman Lee, is to jump next to Mike Cody, our architect, and have him talk a bit about the project and the design and how the building was laid out on the site and so forth. And if Jake joins us, ultimately, I'll have him speak to it. Otherwise, Brian or Ken, maybe towards the end of our presentation, you guys can speak a little bit about Harris Cold Storage and the cold storage business. So Mike, if you're ready to go, I think we have your slides up, but I'd turn it over to you.
And just
Certainly.
let me know when you want me to advance.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you, Alderman. Again, my name is Mike Cody. I'm with Ware Malcolm. We're the architects for this project. I actually grew up in the 19th ward and know this site very well, actually. What we're proposing here is 100,000 square foot, approximately 100,000 square foot, just under 99,400 square feet, cold storage facility. By that, we mean it's a multi-temperature facility that has a cold dock. You can see the freezer portion of the building, or what we're anticipating to be the freezer portion of the building, sits closest to the Ashland Street side. The cold dock, which is where the trucks will service the building, sit on the western edge of the building. We have set back the building 15 feet from our property line on Ashland Avenue. You know, there's a bus stop there, and working with the city and our site planning meetings, we came to the conclusion that we needed a little bit more landscaping to separate it from the street. We have employee parking, vehicle parking at the south portion of the site, with the offices at that south west corner there. There is a utility room back there, and then we have some trailer storage towards the rear of the site. We've tried to situate the site so that it blends in with the neighborhood. This truck access and vehicular access is conducive to the regular traffic flow patterns within the neighborhood. We also have it heavily landscaped along South Ashland, as well as we have defined a spot for a local artist's sculpture at the middle of the building, the middle of our property, I would say. If we could proceed to a couple slides later, I mean, we could go through each slide, but there's really not a lot to talk about relative to the adjacent zoning, the adjacent properties in the neighborhood. You can see the zoning district. We're part of that planned manufacturing district. The next slide is what I wanted to get to with the rendering, and we can go back if there are any questions. So being a cold storage facility, the nature of the product limits us in some of the design capabilities. We're utilizing what's called as an insulated metal panel, which is a freezer panel. So it allows us the ability to be, 100 degrees on the outside during a hot, what should be a hot August night, and 20 below zero on the inside. We haven't defined what temperature we're going to be, but because of that, you can imagine the coloring on these panels is very important. So we're limited in a color pattern that we can use in arrangement. But what we're describing here is the architecture that we've utilized. The freezer clear height is 50 foot. And you can see where we've integrated the office at this southwest corner here. And if you scroll down, you can see some of the other materials that we're utilizing on this, on the building. We have, I'm actually going to zoom into the copy that I have as well. Insulated metal panels with a couple of different colors. We do have, signage, obviously, and then storefront. If you can go to the next slide. This shows the Ashland Street side of the building. Again, heavily landscaped. We've tried to create some articulation on the wall that creates an interesting facade. Obviously, being cold storage, we can't pop windows in there. And again, we're limited with the amount of color panel that we can utilize. So we've decided as a team, along with the City of Chicago's site planning team, to provide a little bit more of a setback and, again, heavily landscape that area. If you go to the last slide, this is the opposite end of the building showing the truck docks. Not very exciting, but it's kind of the business end of the facility. And I'll take any questions that anyone has. Maybe we want to continue to present the whole thing, Rob. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Mike. Before I have Sarah talk about the traffic study, one other thing I wanted to add on to what Mike was discussing in terms of the Ashland Avenue setback. The current building right now, as it exists, is built right to the property line. This building, on its surface, 15 feet may not sound like a lot, but it actually is a considerable amount of setback to move this building back from where the current improvements are. This will actually also be the only building along Ashland Avenue on the east side from 35th Street all the way down to Pershing that is set back from the property line. So the design team has really tried to work on minimizing the impact both visually and in terms of just how it imposes on the community and tries to reduce that impact. So I just wanted to also give that context that that landscaping buffer along there, along with the setback of the building, should help with the Ashland Avenue facade. Sarah, do you want to take us through the traffic study methodology and the results?
Absolutely. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Disney-Hoffey, and I am the Director of Traffic Engineering at Sam Schwartz Consulting. So you can go just a couple. There we go. My slides are small, not as interesting as architectural plans. So I'll be brief, knowing that we have a limited amount of time this evening and can answer more questions later. But I'll start by describing what is contained in a traffic impact study, since most people don't encounter this type of evaluation on a daily basis. So to start out, we always go out and assess what the existing conditions are. What is the current volume of traffic moving on these roadways? How does it navigate through the intersections? For this study, we defined a study boundary along Ashland and along Pershing. Along Ashland, we were between the signalized intersection at 37th Street down to the signalized intersection at Pershing. And along Pershing, we went from Paulina on the west over to what's labeled here as Iron Street on the east, which is serving that city-owned portion of this PMD. Next, we develop an estimate of how much traffic will be generated by the site itself, which you can see outlined in green here, along with its 2 access points labeled. We then develop a traffic model of what the existing and future traffic operational conditions will be, so we can compare and determine what kind of impact the development may have. And then finally, based on that comparison and our assessment of best practices in transportation and safety design, we identify impacts and recommend improvements for the study area. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Alderwoman. And here you can see that step 2, the amount of traffic that we estimate may be generated by this development. Traffic engineers commonly refer to a reference manual developed by an organization called the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And for decades, that organization, ITE, has been conducting surveys and recording the traffic characteristics of a wide variety of land uses. So in this case, we looked at a warehousing use. There is a specific use for cold storage, but we found that the traffic generation data for a warehouse use was a little higher and therefore more conservative. So that's what we used in our study. And that's how we ended up with these numbers here. So to summarize, on a daily basis, the expectation is that there would be 200 total trips, and a trip is either an inbound or an outbound movement of traffic. 140 of which would be cars, 60 of which would be trucks. That accounts for all sizes of trucks, from box trucks to larger semi trucks. For some context, the daily traffic on Ashland Avenue is roughly 21,000. And on Pershing, it's about 16,500. Then we also look at those busy rush hours, the highest hour of traffic in the morning and the highest hour of traffic in the evening, when people are commonly commuting to and from the office, and you get that crush of traffic. During those peak hours, we would expect that in total, there would be 20 inbound and outbound trips during both of those peak hours. We can move on to the next slide. Based on our model, we determined that the site traffic that I showed on the prior slide accounts for roughly 0.2 to 0.3% of the traffic that would be traveling along Ashland or along Pershing under future conditions. So generally speaking, it's not a substantial quantity by comparison, but we did have concerns about where that access onto Pershing is located relative to the big signalized intersection at Pershing and Ashland. And so as a result, we recommended that inbound left turns be prohibited at that access. We would not want somebody to wait in the travel lane and block the traffic that's approaching behind it. such that that traffic would spill back toward Ashland Avenue and cause a potential safety concern. So to facilitate that recommendation for no inbound left turns at Ashland or at Access 1 on Pershing, we do recommend that both cars and trucks can fully circulate within the property so that anyone who, say, wants to leave this site, make a left turn out onto Pershing to go out toward the Dan Ryan at the end of the day. Excuse me, I just said the wrong direction, but if somebody is coming from the west, they live in the neighborhood, they can make a left turn onto Ashland and enter via 38th Street, where that second access would be located. As Rob mentioned, our study has been submitted and reviewed by the Chicago Department of Transportation. It's currently posted on the city's website for studies that are subject to air quality review, so that's publicly available. And I would be happy to answer any questions that may come up at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Jenny, do you want to now take us through the air quality study?
Sure, that'd be great. We can start on the slide. Thank you. So my name's Jenny Conan. I'm a senior environmental scientist with Bar Engineering Company, and I participated in the modeling and preparation of this air quality modeling report, which is posted for public comment on the city's website. So in accordance with the City of Chicago Municipal Code, the project completed an air impact study to confirm that its potential impacts in the surrounding area is insignificant. All of the project sources, both stationary and mobile, were included in the analysis, and the pollutants evaluated based on the guidance were nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, both the fine particulate, which is defined as with a diameter of less than 2.5 microns, and PM10, which is a particulate matter with a particulate size of less than 10 microns. The project impacts also evaluated the total project's impacts at its fence line and beyond, and compared it to the significant impact levels, which we'll talk a little bit in the next slides. So if you want to go on, thank you. So this is directly from the modeling report that's posted. This image shows the layout of the modeled project sources and the X and Y locations of the receptors, which are represented as orange dots. And those dots are where the dispersion model calculates an air concentration from all of the project sources that were modeled collectively. So we included all project sources both on site and in the sizable area surrounding the project. You can see the different roads that were mentioned earlier for the traffic study are shown here in various colors. And you can also make out the fence line as well, where which denotes the area where the property is going to be prohibiting public access. And we also have you can see there's a single space heater that's in that southeast corner, which was mentioned in the design, is in the bright green sort of box at the bottom corner there. Just to give you a sense of spacing here, we have about 15 meter or 50-foot spacing receptors around the fence line, and we have beyond the fence line, we have 50 meter, which is roughly 165 feet spacing beyond the fence line there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the significant impact level is a regulatory level that is used to determine whether a project's highest modeled impacts demonstrate that its overall potential air concentrations are insignificant. And that significant impact level, or SIL, is listed in the second column there in micrograms per cubic meter, which is a unit of concentration per mass volume of air. And this is showing for each of the pollutants evaluated and the appropriate averaging times that the project impacts are below that significant impact level by an ample margin. So you can see in that right column there, the percentage of the SIL. So for example, the PM10 24-hour SIL is 5. Our project impacts for all the sources shown in the previous slide are 0.12 micrograms per cubic meter, meaning we were 2.5% of that SIL. Next slide, please. These two images are also posted with the air quality impacts report. And the one on the left is showing the 24-hour PM 2.5 modeled results. And the one on the right is showing the 1-hour NO2 project impacts. And the different colors represent the various percentages of the applicable sill. And you can see, well, it's a little zoom, hard to see on this, but the highest modeled impact is occurring at the fence line in the southeast corner near the space heater and some of the on-site the truck entrance and exit on that southern end by entrance 1. It's denoted by a star. So you can also see how the impacts from the project decrease rapidly the further you travel away from the property, which is looking at the legend there, you can see that the size of the dots starts to shrink with lower impacts, and you can see how that decreases the further you get away from the project. But all of these results, like I said previously, are all well below that significant impact level. Next slide, please. So just to summarize what I have presented here, the project modeling approach followed the current 2021 City of Chicago and recommended guidance, and followed Illinois EPA's recommended practices, that project's air impacts were less than the significant impact levels for all of the pollutants that were evaluated, and it demonstrates that the proposed project is not going to significantly contribute to existing ambient air in the surrounding area. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenny. I don't know that Jake has, oh, I see Jake. Great, you were able to connect. If you could maybe just talk a little bit about Karis Cold Storage and the cold storage operations, just to generally, and the distinction of cold storages, maybe compared to typical warehousing uses.
Sure, I think it's, well, thank you, Rob, and everybody for participating. I think it's important to note that, we've spent a lot of time and work, as you've heard, on making sure this project is a success. We've done other projects in the immediate area, not too far from here. And so that was a large reason why we wanted to be in this area, as it had been very successful for other similar projects. We have another cold storage facility just down the street at Ashland and 43rd. And what we've noticed is, certainly the truck traffic is substantially less on cold storage projects than traditional non-cold storage projects, like the e-commerce facilities in the area. But also what's nice and what really for us made this location appealing was the cold storage facility we have down the street, out of space and in need of additional capacity. And for us, this is, a facility to serve the city, to serve, ultimately all of the residents of the city, and restaurants and grocery stores, primarily with food, both refrigerated and frozen, most of which is made or processed or packaged, in the general area. So, it should ultimately be not just a benefit to, the local community, but also mitigating, impacts from trucks having to travel in from out of state or, even out from the suburbs into the city. So happy to answer any questions that anyone has about the project.
So thank you for that, Jake. We are a little past the time allotted for the call. And if you all are okay with staying on for a little bit, I'm fine with that if people have specific questions. But like I said, this is going to be the first of at least 2 meetings regarding this. I think there's a lot to cover here. I know we had some additional folks join after the start of the call. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask of any of the folks that have nope, I see stuff coming into.
We're happy to
the
stay
chat.
on, Alderwoman Lee.
Sorry?
We're happy to stay on to answer
Okay.
questions.
Great. So I see a couple hands raised. So I'm gonna take the hands raised first. Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So you mentioned you've been putting a lot or at least multiple cold storage facilities down here on the southwest side in the Stockyards Planned Manufacturing District. How many of these types of facilities have you put in on the north side?
We haven't put on any on the north side. I'm not sure how many are up there, but the answer is for us, we haven't done any. There are some I know out kind of by the airport and certainly out in the suburbs and the south suburbs, but none that we've done on the north side.
Okay, yeah, I think it's really interesting and concerning to me that a lot of these new facilities are going in on the southwest side, even though there are manufacturing districts that are on the north side. Those are being redeveloped into very different uses, but we've got a lot of those uses down here. So my next question is, what level of analysis have you done on the cumulative impacts of the projects down here, whether it's traffic or pollution for this project, as well as all the other projects that are going in down here by us?
Sir, Jenny, do you want to just talk as it relates to traffic and the air quality study, which are the two requirements of the zoning code? And I did find a link. I'll try to add that in Alderwoman Lee to the zoning code requirement.
Sure, I'd be happy to start with an answer to that. And so I gave a very simplistic overview of what a traffic study includes, but as I mentioned, we start by counting what the traffic volumes and the travel movements are through the area to begin with. But then in addition to adding what the site traffic is, we also account for known developments in the area. So we included traffic for the Amazon delivery station at 35th and Ashland that was under construction, but not yet complete and was an approved project. We included that into our future traffic model. And then for the developments that are expected to happen but are not yet known, we interface with an organization called the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And they, for those who are not familiar, they develop a long-range planning model for the entire Chicago metropolitan area, looking out about 30 years into the future. Their current model is 2050, and they use that to generate recommendations for how we can support both economic growth and household growth throughout the region. And so through that model, we can get a sense, and it's very common for traffic studies to use that to get a sense of how much growth is expected in the travel on certain roadways. So we interfaced with them, asked them how much growth they're expecting, and factored that in, applied that on top of the existing traffic that we counted along the Ashland corridor and along the Pershing corridor to create an increase in background traffic that would be attributable to general area growth and additional development that is not yet public or on the books, so that we can account for those conditions. I hope that answers your question, Chris.
It definitely provides some clarification, but it sounds to me like you're telling me that there was not a consideration of the full cumulative burden that is being placed on the southwest side, the 11th Ward, and the neighboring communities for this project.
Well, our growth percentage accounted for what CMAP is modeling for this area based on expected increase in economic development. So based on that, which is the best crystal ball that the region has for growth beyond known developments, that's what we use to account for it.
So is your project being evaluated based on how much it adds to the cumulative burden, or simply its own component of that burden?
I see the question that you're asking. So we did evaluate what overall transportation operation is like. And as you would expect, there at signalized intersections, you get very different results than at unsignalized or stop controlled intersections. What was shown in terms of what that rush hour AM and PM peak hour operation is at our signalized intersections at Ashland and Pershing and at 37th and Ashland, we were showing better than minimum standard traffic operation and delay at those locations based on the number of lanes that are currently provided there. I'll keep it brief and not get into the whole grading criteria that traffic engineers use to evaluate that kind of thing. Where we saw higher levels of delay are in locations where you also see that today, at say 38th Street, which is stop controlled at Ashland. Ashland is a busy street. And so we would expect that people might experience a slightly longer wait time turning on to Ashland. And those high delays are recognized in our existing traffic model as well as future, because that's a common condition. So we did put our study through a CDOT review. There are certain criteria that are used to decide if an intervention, like say a new traffic signal is put in place, and those unsignalized intersections in this area did not meet that criteria. And so the recommendations that we made met the CDOT expectation in that respect.
Thank you. Yeah, and sorry for monopolizing here. This is my very last question. Is anyone on the call besides the community members that joined, do you live in or have plans to move to Bridgeport, Canaryville, McKinley Park, or back of the yards anytime soon?
If
I will
anybody's
take
trying to
that as-
answer, if you're trying to answer, you'd have to unmute yourself.
Great. Yeah. So I'm very concerned with the cumulative burden being placed on our community compared to other communities because of this and like-minded and similar developments. It's nothing against the cold storage usage specifically. It's much more about the equity question regarding the citywide development and why so much of these dangerous, polluting, and disruptive land uses are being concentrated. New land uses are being concentrated in our community. That's all I have to add tonight. Thanks so much for answering my question.
Thanks, Chris. There was a question in the chat. The slide concerning air pollutants had NO2 1, I believe, at 50% plus SIL. Is this peak emissions or average output? Jenny, can you answer that?
Yes, so the maximum, I didn't include that table, it's in the report, but the modeled impacts shown are the highest modeled impacts over the complete 5-year meteorological data set that we evaluated, and it represents the maximum, the peak traffic each hour from each hour at various locations on the roads. It does not represent the general average. It actually looks at the maximum for each hour of the day. So from the traffic study, hopefully that clears that up.
Thanks for that. We'll go to the next question. John Belchick, go ahead.
Thanks, Alderwoman. So my name is John Belsick. I'm with the McKinley Park Development Council, and I just had a quick couple questions just concerning the sustainability of the project in terms of what sort of green infrastructure or green mitigation practices are you going to be incorporating into your project? I'm talking either permeable pavement, bioswales, green roofs, solar panels, things like that, in terms of offsetting some of those, pollutants and greenhouse gases and negative environmental impacts that will be coming from your project.
Mike, do you want to flag that one?
Sure. We are subject to the City of Chicago Sustainability Development Checklist. We need to obtain 100 points as part of that checklist. We've begun our exercise into obtaining those points, but we haven't defined all of the exact measures that we're taking. So I don't want to irresponsibly state that we're going to be doing something, but we are going to be achieving the 100 points that are required of us.
I'm not familiar with what.
Oh, I'm sorry.
With how many points each thing is worth. So like, could you give me an example for an example?
Certainly. As an example, solar, if we were to install solar on site, it would achieve, let's say 10 points. And we have to cumulatively, amongst many different facets, achieve that point value. I can look for the sustainability development matrix that we are subject to, and forward a copy or put a link in the chat if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great.
You got it.
Thanks, John. Matt, you're next.
Hi, so this is actually more of a question directed at Sarah, the traffic engineer, really just regarding some background questions about what went into the traffic study. Seems like there was a lot that went into it, and I know we're already past. So if any of this needs to get put into the second call, totally understand. But main questions I have are really just regarding for the traffic study, what the count of heavy traffic, like trucks, semis that are already on Ashland Pershing, just to get a better understanding of what percent of an increase it would be, particularly for Pershing. It is definitely my top concern, to see if that 60 additional trucks that are being added, if that is more of an increase than just the overall increase in traffic, because totally understand that the workers of the cold storage facility are going to be parked there most of the time. I'll stop there. I do have one more kind of comment / question, but I'll just stop to see if there's any idea of kind of what the breakdown of the traffic that's already there is heavy trucks.
I do have that information. When we do those existing traffic counts, we categorize by vehicle size. So we end up with counts of cars, what we call medium trucks, which are the non-articulated trucks like a semi, and then heavy trucks. I don't know that information for both roadways off the top of my head, but since it sounds like we're going to go to a second meeting, if it's all right with you, Alderwoman Lee, I can gather that information and be prepared with a very specific answer for our next discussion.
I think that would be great. And I appreciate everybody being so respectful of the time. I don't want to keep people any later. I've officially been going now for 13 hours. It's first day of school today. So I'm running out of gas myself. I think we're going to have a really robust second meeting. To any of the community members that are here, if you'd like to email any additional questions, sort of post this meeting that you'd like to provide to the developers and anybody that's on this call, we'd be happy to forward those so that they can come prepared with answers the next time. And then obviously anything else that comes up, we'll tackle at that point as well. There was a comment in here with a question regarding demolition. I think that is potentially for the next call in terms of your questions. And Rob, you can jump in here on this. The demolition requires a permit. And I don't even know that that these guys are ready to talk about that part just yet. So I don't want to answer for them. But I'm just noting everything that was in the chat. And I think, let me see here. Sorry, I'm trying to manage the chat and everything else with there have been a couple of links that have been posted to the chat. So if you want to grab that, thank you, Mike Cody, for posting that. Yes, Matt, we can add bike and pedestrian counts in the follow-up. And then I think that's it for now. If you have any other questions, please go ahead and email those to ward11@cityofchicago.org and just reference the property address, 3815 South Ashland. We will get something on the books for within the next 30 days, and we're going to shoot to provide everybody minimum of 2 weeks notice on that. And we'll schedule at least 90 minutes for that next meeting, just so that we have ample time. I think this is probably the most significant new thing in the ward since I've been in office here. So I want to provide ample time for folks to ask questions. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Please, if you want to grab anything from the chat, copy and paste it now before it's all gone. That's what I'm going to be doing. Otherwise, please feel free to sign off, and I appreciate everybody's time. Have a good night.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Chris, I have that link that you requested earlier, so I'll just email that to you directly if that's okay, or text it to you. What's the best way to get that to you? Just drop it in here.
Not sure if you're gonna hear me. I'm driving. Text it to me if you can.
Okay, I'll text it to you.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. I think I've got everything. So everybody have a good night and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, everybody.